and this is the 5th session, which is maximising the toolkit. So it's, in a way, it's a slightly generic session about the toolkit itself and how it can be used and how it can be maximised in schools. And what we have got on the agenda today is we've got Matt Blyton, who's here to talk about the Festival of Friends project, which involves and is kind of surrounded by the toolkit in many ways, which he'll share in a minute. We've also got Reg White from Haverfordwest High School, who's going to tell us a bit about how they've used the toolkit within their school. And I'm hopefully, if my laptop will let me, I'm going to share the new toolkit enhancements and then just navigate around the tool to show how it works. So as you can see how slow my laptop's being with the almost there sign at the bottom. So the session is recorded. It's going to be accessible after the webinar. I'll get it uploaded in the next day or two. So you can access it post-webinar as well. If you haven't already, if you could just pop your name and your role in the chat, please, that'd be really helpful for us to know who's here. And feel free to answer questions as well. So I'm hoping I can go on to my next slide. Yes, so over to you, please, to talk about Festival of Friends.
Well, hello, good afternoon, everybody. I've noticed that we've got at least 2, possibly 3 people on the call here who have either been involved in a Festival of Friends project or currently are involved in a Festival of Friends project. So Becky and Anita and Natalie, please do feel free to chip in if you think I've missed things and think it might be useful. Okay, so the Festival of Friends is a school improvement project that takes place across quite a lengthy period of time, ideally at least a year, but it can be done in a shorter spell of time. But at its heart is an assessment of where a school is using the self-evaluation framework within the Thriving Lives Toolkit, together with professional development, which is drawn from some of the resources that are on the Toolkit's web site. The slide you're seeing has a couple of little shields on it, and just to explain, those 2 shields are two shields created by children through competitions to sort of mark the Festival of Friends in their area. So they've both been digitalized by university departments. The top one was up in Lincolnshire, and the bottom one is a current one that we're using in a Festival of Friends project involving 25 schools across the Portsmouth and Gosport area. If you can go to the next slide, please, Vicky. I won't spend too much time explaining who I am. You can just cast your eye down the bullet points, but I've been involved in supporting schools with military children ever since becoming a deputy head of one myself in 1995. So I've been sort of working in this area for about 30 years, and now as an independent advisor, I specialise in supporting schools that have got military children or children from armed forces families, shall we say, on their rolls. Okay, thank you. Next slide. So what is the Festival of Friends? Well, it's very much a collaborative, peer supportive project, and it's operated in a local area, ideally with a local HEI or a university involved, because that gives us the opportunity to do a bit of widening participation work, because I'm sure virtually everybody on the call will be aware that service children are a targeted group within the higher education sphere. They're underrepresented currently. And the purpose of the project is to try and develop and share good practice, to upskill teaching staff, and to encourage service children and their parents to think about further and higher education. And the project is aimed specifically at schools that have a smaller number of children from armed forces families on their rolls, which of course is the vast majority of schools that have a military footprint. and it works by engaging some schools with larger numbers who've got quite a bit of expertise already, and to use those schools, which we call hubs, to cascade information from myself or a project lead down to the hub leaders, and then the hub leaders working with a group of schools with identified network leaders or service children's champions to disseminate key learning and the use of the Thriving Lives Toolkit, which, as I say, is absolutely at the heart of the project. So one of the first things that all schools have to do is they have to sign up and start using the toolkit. Thank you, Vicky. In terms of the way the project works, and there have been 5 full year-long iterations of it so far, and hopefully at least another 1 or 2 next year. But I've also seen some local authorities with smaller numbers of service children get involved and run a similar project to this, which they're calling Festival of Friends, over a shorter period of time. So schools work together collaboratively, learning from one another, supported by a hub leader. They use the self-evaluation framework within the toolkit to identify, first of all, a principle that they feel they could enhance, and then specific things within that principle that they could improve. And then they run a small school improvement projects over the course of the period of the project to try and improve that area. And throughout the project, they're given access to really high quality based research-led CPD drawn from the materials that are linked to the principles within the Thriving Lives Toolkit. I think it's really important to say that the reach of the project is very good, because it's sort of peer supported, so it has that credibility of people that are currently working in schools leading a lot of the learning in it. And at the end of the year, we try and celebrate the successes and the improvements in the schools in a couple of key ways. If you can click to the last slide, please, Vicky. I think it's the last slide. By first of all bringing some representative children and members of staff to a special day to celebrate the learning and to showcase what the schools have been doing. That could be online. That's what it was when it was held up in North Yorkshire and the York area. It might be at an external venue, a sort of civic venue, or it might be at a university, particularly a university that's trying to widen participation for their service children as a targeted group. And you can see a couple of photographs there of the last event, which was held actually in the Lincolnshire area, where after the children went through a variety of workshops, there was an opportunity for them to attend, you know, a more formal ceremony with some entertainment and some speakers, and each school then coming up to the stage to be presented with a certificate and a nice memento of the work that they'd been doing. And all of the schools that attended set up an exhibition space, which then showcased what they'd been doing. And then depending on how the project is funded, we've in the previous editions managed to then pull together a case study booklet. There are three, no, two, sorry, that are, no, there are three there that are being shown, and they're all on the the SCiP Alliance's website if you want to have a look at them. And each one, there's a double-page spread per school that gives the context of the school, its links to the military, how many service children they've got, what the project was designed to do, roughly what did they do, and what was the impact, and what are their next steps. So it's just one example of a project that has very much, you know, school improvement for armed forces families at the heart, but the route to measuring the impact and evidencing the need is the use of the Thriving Lives Toolkit, which I think is a game changer in terms of these types of projects. I've come across many projects in the past that have been done based on anecdote as opposed to based on an evidence-led framework. So that, in a nutshell, is what I've been involved in doing in terms of this particular project. But just wondered whether any of the members of people on the call either have any questions, or people that have been involved in a Fest with a Friends project want to make a comment or two on their views of it.
Matt, hello everybody. Anita, I know you can't see me at the moment.
Hello, Anita.
Hello, lovely to speak to you. I just want to say how powerful it was for the children, the amount that they gained from it, and the pride they felt in, being a participant and going to Oxford University, which is what they did. They were at Brookes University, and it was a really good. I think for us also, it raised the profile of those children, which was very important at that time. So, really worth doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much for saying that. I mean, what's rather nice, I think, with these sort of projects also is it gives the opportunity of bringing service children together from different schools and celebrate their identity. And there's often that wow moment, particularly at an event like the one that you've just described, Anita, at the university, where they'll look around and just think, oh my goodness me, we're part of quite a big group here. Hadn't realised. Lots of schools involved.
Matt,
okay,
thank you. Can I ask a quick question? With your experience, because you've obviously through this project and through your role as well, you've come across lots of different schools using the toolkit. What are the different approaches that you've seen to how schools use it? Because obviously those with lower numbers may not probably won't have the time to sit down and go through the whole toolkit in one go. What kind of approaches do you advise, or have you seen it's worked quite well for those that do have lower numbers, or just approaches for those that don't have much time, as we all know how stretched everyone is for time at the moment, just to give maybe some tips of how it can be approached and how it could be used effectively?
Yeah, sure. I mean, on the face of it, it doesn't sound like a particularly big job. 7 principles, each with 5 or 6 self-evaluation questions with a total of 40 questions. That doesn't sound too big a job, but of course, once you get into the detail and you look at each of those questions and you try and make a judgment as to whether a school is working at a pre-emerging or an emerging or a developing or even at an embedding level, and you're involving others and getting their views, then actually it will take a long time if you do it properly. So I would recommend for most schools, particularly schools that perhaps have minority service children on their rolls, would be to start off at senior leader level, looking at principle 1, which is a strategic oversight, as it were. Not that I'm saying principle 1 is the most important, but I think it's a very important starting point. And then just to look at the headlines, the descriptor, the overall descriptor of the other 6 principles, and go with a gut feeling as to which of these do we feel that perhaps we're not as far along as we ought to be, and then do a deep dive into the 5 or 6 questions on that principle and do no more. Then crack those, look at how you can set some targets and over a period of time strengthen that, and perhaps each term look at one more principle so that you've covered all 7 over the course of a 2-year cycle, and then you go back to the original one. That's how I would recommend schools use it, unless you're one of those schools that's perhaps got majority on roll, in which case I think you probably need to be looking at all 7 principles within a shorter period of time.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Sorry,
I was about to say, has anyone else got anything to add? Thank you.
Yeah, just to jump in, I've had a question that's kind of relevant to that, Matt. So Amy and Debbie have asked, what would you define as a small or large military footprint in schools, based on your experience?
So this is a really good question. And when I was working with a small group of advisors to write the 50 case studies, we were really keen on trying to make sure that we had a big selection of schools in terms of their proportion and their numbers. And I think if we try and answer that question in terms of proportions, first of all, rather than absolute numbers, I would say that the majority of service children in England go to schools where there are 5% or fewer on the school roll that are from military backgrounds. So I would define that as a small cohort. When you're looking at over 50%, there are probably only a couple of secondaries that I'm aware of, state maintained secondaries, that have got that proportion, and primaries there are a few more, but not masses. And I would be saying that anything over 50% is a very large cohort. We looked in the case studies at trying to make sure that we had some 5% or fewer, and then less than a third. So we also included the less than the third as being a small cohort, less than 5%, a very small cohort, which is the majority. But we didn't really work in absolute numbers, because you can have a large secondary school of 1,400 pupils, and you can have 15 service children, which is less than well, roughly 1% of the roll. But actually 25 service children is a significant minority, isn't it? So I think percentages are perhaps more useful. Do you agree with that, Reg?
I was just about to say, I think that.
Just to give you an example, so we've got 70. So we're a secondary school. We've got 70 service children, but because of the size of the school, that's only 4.1%. But it's still, so numbers-wise, it's significant. Percentage-wise, it's not. So I do think it depends on it's the capacity of the school which really defines how important, in some respects, they'll see the service children. We're lucky, we're well supported, but in other schools, they would say, well, that's not actually that many, but it's a lot when you're talking about service children.
Yes, it is. And just to build on that, actually, based on what Anita, who chipped in a moment ago, at Anita's school, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, Anita, you've got a smaller number of service children than at Reg's school, and yet it's over a third of your entire cohort, isn't it? She may not be able to answer that. Yes, you're there.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Significant proportion.
Yeah, you're a little bit quiet for some reason, but knowing your school, I would say that your school has a larger proportion. So more important to be getting through the framework quicker than at Reg's school, because the proportion is so much smaller, even though the number is more. We're getting too complicated. I'll hand back over to you.
We know what you mean. Thank you so much. And Reg, it's kind of a bit of a seamless link there, because you've started to introduce your school slightly. If you could, Reg has come along today to we've met a couple of times actually, but at an event in Wales recently, at the Hub Cymru event, Reg spoke about his renewed love for the toolkit, which didn't necessarily start out that way. And I thought it's really good to get someone along who works in a school, who has had a bit of a journey with the toolkit, to maybe share some insights with you, so you've got a bit more of an understanding on how the toolkits are used in schools. It's really nice to have someone come along as well from a secondary school. We did have some feedback from some previous work that we've done, saying it'd be really nice to get more examples in secondary schools about how it's used, because a lot of the resources are more primary based. So Reg has come along to share some thoughts and experiences of his journey with the toolkit he's had at his school. So Reg, over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I'll just sort of start off on the same lines as Matt, give you a little bit about my background. So I was a service child. My mother and father were both in the army. I joined the army at 16 and did 38 years. I've got 4 children, all service children. One of my sons is in the army, and I also look after the 70 or so service children in Haverfordwest High School. So I've got lots of different experiences of service children, and that helps me. It definitely helped me when I was doing the toolkit. To give you a bit of a background in Wales, we're different from the rest of the UK in that we have an organisation called SSCE Cymru, and what they did was set up 3 levels of attainment. They call it the Families Friendly School Award, and it was bronze, silver and gold. And so in order to achieve your bronze award, you had to register with the toolkit. To get your silver award, you had to complete the toolkit. And then to get your gold award, you have to action the outcomes that you identified from the silver award. So I wouldn't say we're forced to do it, but if we want to achieve the awards, we absolutely have to engage with the toolkit. So going back to some of the points that Matt raised, so how do you do it? Well, obviously it's very simple to register. It's literally just going on and entering your details. When you get into the meat of it, again, it looks, well, there's not much. There's only 7 elements, and how hard can it be? But when you open it up, it's like an elephant, and it can be really off-putting. You're just like, oh my God. And I was like that. I hated it. I was like, I'm not doing this. And then SSCE Cymru sent one of their people down, and we sat down and we talked through it. And the approach we took was we actually treated it like eating an elephant. We took a little bite at a time, and gradually we worked our way through it. But we started off, and don't use the analogy in its as you might picture it, but we started off with the low-hanging fruit, and we dealt with all the stuff that was easy. And it's surprising how much stuff there is in the toolkit that you're already doing. You just don't know it. So do the easy stuff first. Go through all of it, do the easy stuff, and then you can start focusing on the stuff that actually we can achieve that just with a little tweak. That gets you about, I would say, 60%. Then you've got to start putting a bit of work in. And you need, for some of the toolkit, you need institutional change. So you've got to get your senior leadership team on board. A very simple example of that is we needed to capture data specifically for service children. And I don't know if you use an MIS called SIMS. It's quite a popular educational MIS. We had to get SIMS changed so we could actually record service children. And by recording them on the MIS, that if it's management information system, if people didn't know, we were able then to extract data specifically for our service children. The only reason we knew we needed to do that was because it identified on the toolkit. And so they're the sort of things where you have to put the work in. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you need to score something like 75% in Wales to get your silver award, which obviously still leaves you quite a chunk to go, but also gives you lots of work, because once you've identified what you're not doing, then you have to do something about it. And that bit there, where doing something about it is the challenge. And you can't do it on your own. So if you're sitting in a school at the moment trying to manage service children on your own, you need support. You need SLT, probably need at least one more person to help you out, because it's a huge job to try and do on your own. So that would be my insights into the Thriving Lives Toolkit. I will finish by saying, though, that it's absolutely worthwhile. We've changed how we manage service children. I would say 50% of how we did service children has changed since we completed the Thriving Lives Toolkit. And you know, we've got a Forces Life Club. In fact, I've literally just come back from a Purple Up Activities Day today, where we had 55 kids out, you know, all wearing their purple T-shirts, and all the public were commenting on it. And it's just really good now. There's just a really good atmosphere around service kids. All the school understands what a service child is, and that's, you know, predominantly to do with completing the toolkit and thinking about things that we weren't doing that we've now been able to achieve.
Thank you, Reg. I think Matt's got a question.
Well, it was more just a point just to build on what you've just said there, Reg. You're absolutely right about SLT buy-in, and that was the point essentially I was making in suggesting that all schools should start with Principle 1, that strategic overview, because otherwise you can, as you know, a person that has the responsibility as the lead for service children, you could find you're doing a lot of work and a lot of planning, but it makes no tangible impact because you haven't got that leadership buy-in. So I think that's a really important point that you made. The only thing that I would perhaps challenge you on very slightly is that clearly you've got an incredible background in terms of lived experience yourself. But I've come across plenty of people that have got no military background who have found actually leading on service children and managing and navigating the toolkit very manageable. I think you're a huge asset clearly to your schools, but you don't have to have that in order to use the toolkit effectively. And Vicky, it might just be worth just reminding people on the call and those that watch this webinar later as to how the Thriving Lives Toolkit self-evaluation framework came to be. You know, it was a university department based at Derby that did extensive research by visiting schools with identified good practice in all three service areas. So some schools in naval areas, next to RAF bases, next to army bases, some that had small numbers of service children, some that had high numbers, all of whom had a strong reputation and track record and good outcomes. And the research team met with school leaders, with people like yourself, Reg, with parents, with students. They looked at the literature, they looked at websites, and they pulled out what good practice looked like, and then sort of group that good practice into the 7 areas that we now call the 7 principles. So the thing that you get when you use the Thriving Lives Toolkit is you get the use of something that is research driven and evidenced, and that's why it's so powerful.
Thank you, Matt. That's really helpful. Just before we move on to the next part, where I'm actually going to be getting the tool up and navigating through it and just showing you some new enhancements, which Reg will be really happy to hear, that actually makes it, I think, a lot easier to go through the toolkit because it's giving you hints all the way through. I just want to check if there's any questions before we move on to the next section, as it's kind of going to be changing slightly from here onwards. Right. So with like I've just mentioned, there's been some enhancements within the toolkit recently. We've done some other webinar sessions on some of these as well, but I just wanted to highlight a couple of these things just to make it really obvious of what's changed and how we've made these enhancements and what the differences are. So one bit of feedback we were getting from schools is when they had finished all 38, I think it's 38 questions altogether, so all the 7 principles, and then submitted the toolkit, it meant that they had then had to start again from scratch to be able to go through it again, say if they wanted to do it on an annual or biannual basis. So something that we have changed recently is rather than once it's complete, you don't necessarily have to start again from the beginning. You can just carry on adding to the same toolkit, adding data in, evidence in, and keep going and building on what you've already got rather than starting again. So that's something that we changed. I think that was a couple of months ago, which hopefully has reacted on that feedback and makes it easier. You can still start from scratch if you want to, but you have got the option to just carry on building on your current assessment. Something recently as well, which Matt was also involved in, was adding 50 case studies to the toolkit. Like Matt mentioned earlier, when the case studies were when the schools for the case studies were being looked at and being researched, they were really mindful, the project team were really mindful to make sure there were case studies from schools with low service children numbers and high from across the UK, primary and secondary schools as well. So that was really important to make sure that different schools could then have a look and find a school in a similar context to themselves to find out, they get some inspiration. And then there's also a new resource on there, which I am going to share in 2 seconds. So I'm just going to stop. I'm just going to come off this slide now. Matt, I don't know if you want to introduce this for a second about the responses on here, as you were part of the team, obviously, that came up with these responses, just while I swap my screens to get onto the toolkit. I don't mind if you wouldn't mind just jumping to explain how these came about, the example responses.
Of course, Vicky. Yes. So for those of you that are familiar with the toolkit and the way the self-evaluation works, you'll know what I mean when I talk about emerging, developing and embedding. For those that may not have used the toolkit, each question, for example, how effectively do you use any dedicated resource and funding on service children? You have to make a judgment as to whether the school is at an emerging level, which is at a fairly low level that definitely needs improvement, or at a developing level. And I would say that developing is a pretty good place to be, particularly if you've got a minority number of service children, perhaps not quite where you'd want it to be. If you're in a school with a very, very large number of service children, you should be aspiring to that sort of outstanding area or embedding practice. The problem, of course, is that, you know, how does a school know whether or not it's still at the emerging level or is now at the developing level? So when the case studies were written, the team that worked on them, the first thing that we did was we tried to exemplify what emerging looked like, what developing practice looked like, and what embedding practice looked like in every single one of the 40 questions. And we then shared the outcomes with sort of sector specialists. So, for example, Principle 5 around children are heard, we took to a university research team that had done a lot of work on children's voice, and we said, do you think this looks right? And we made some amendments. And following quite a heavy quality assurance process, they were then published and they're now available. And I believe Vicky's going to show you how you find the guidance documents that exemplify those 3 standards.
Perfect. Thank you, Matt. So like Matt just explained, there's different examples of responses for each question in the toolkit at the 3 different levels. So this really helps for schools to get a bit of more of a grasp and a bit more accurate understanding of where to self-assess yourself currently. And another thing that's really helpful as well is if you're currently at an embedding phase, it then gives you examples of objectives to set to help move up to those next stages. So within the toolkit, when we first added these in, within the resource boxes here, we had the PDF document for each principle under evidence examples. But something we've launched literally today, it's become live, is now underneath each question. So within the toolkit, you've got all these questions, you can add your evidence, you can self-assess yourselves. We've now got this box on each one of what this may look like in these different areas. So this I've expanded. So it first of all looks like this when you've logged in. So you can click on show example responses, and there you will find for each question what that may look like at the 3 different levels. As you can see, if for some levels there's just 1 example, I think the most is 5, but it gives examples of what that could look like in a school. And something that you can do that hopefully will make this a lot easier, not just having that there, but you can click on the copy section. If you think, yeah, that's something we're doing at the moment, or that's similar to something we're doing, I need to tweak that. Like I said, they are examples, so they can be modified. You can add your own examples as well. Is you can click on copy, and then when you go and click add evidence, you can paste it in. You can obviously edit how that's worded, delete anything out that's not relevant, add your own extra sections in as well. Click submit. Sorry, I think this is because I've been logged in for so long, because I added this in ages ago. But you click submit, and then it will submit that into your evidence. So that is available for every single principle, for every question as well. And that is now embedded into the tool itself. So this should hopefully make things a lot easier. I think when, like Reg said, when you first look at it, it could be a bit overwhelming, but hopefully this will change that, because it means that there's some examples in there that you can look through and think, yeah, we're doing that, we can tick that off, we can add that in. And like I said, it also gives you examples as inspiration and where you can improve your provision, improve your support to reach that next level. These can be copied and pasted into the objectives as well. So if there are certain things that you'd want to do that you're not doing currently, you can add that in there. So like I said, this was relaunched today. So if you want to log on, you should be able to access it yourself as well at the moment. The case studies that we've been speaking about, if you click on the case study section here, so it is because I've been logged in for too long, so I'm just logging straight back in now. But for each principal, you'll see those case studies. Sorry, my laptop is on such a slow, but it is doing it. You can click on the case studies folder, and then it will take you to the case studies relevant for that principal. So you can see there for the principal, wellbeing is supported. These are the different case studies that are relevant to that principal there. And you can also filter through.
Can you
those
just open one up?
Yeah, of course I
Could
can. You can also filter through these. Yeah, let me just click off my filters there. So if I go to this very top one here, I can go on to a case study and it will open it up, or you can download it. I'm sure your laptops will be far quicker than mine doing this, because it usually happens instantly. It is doing it. So then once you click on the case study, you can then go in here, and within the case studies, first of all, you can see the name of the school, where they're located, and what age range are within that school. And then you've got some information about the context. So this includes things like if the schools might be near a base, if it's more Navy, RAF or Army. It gives you a bit of information about the proportion of service children in that school as well, and any other important information for those schools. And then on that first page as well,
if you just scroll up a little bit, or sorry, just scroll down a little bit to the questions, please, Vicky.
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. So 2.1. So what I've found has really helped schools that I've worked with in an advisory sort of supportive way, is that when they're reflecting on a question, so here we've got, to what extent do you create opportunities for armed forces children to meet and explore experiences together? And then you look at those exemplification statements at the 3 levels that Vicky's just shared with you. Sometimes there's still that sense of, yes, but what does that look like in a school like mine? You know, because we're a primary school with only 50 children on roll, so we've only got 4 service children. What might that look like? And that's the time to then try and find a case study of a primary school that's got a small number of children in roll, and then to look at something either developing level or embedding level, because these bullet points are this school, case study schools, version of how they meet this objective at the embedding stage. And a lot of schools have said to me that they found this really helpful, because it gives a very clear picture as to what it actually looks like in practice in a school that's similar to theirs. And I guess the ambition, Vicky, isn't it, over time, that the 50 will grow, and that other schools out there will be saying, well, we do all of that, and actually we do something slightly different that's not mentioned. Well, let us know. Let's get a case study written. We've got all the templates, and we'll add your case study to it.
Yeah, like you've said, Matt, it's definitely the ambition to grow this. So originally, I think there was like one principal, one case study per principal. So to go from that to 50, we've made that first step, and that was a lot for the team to take on. 50 schools at the beginning. It was like, well, that is ambitious, but Matt and the team worked really hard to make sure all 50 were captured. And like I said, there's examples from primary and secondary schools within each principal. So you should be able to find, hopefully, schools in a similar context to your own, to find some inspiration or find some information about how schools are implementing those the support within that principal. And like I was showing you earlier, you can filter through the case studies to find schools in similar areas to yourselves, or if you wanted to just look at primary schools. And then we've got the proportion of service children in there as well, so hopefully you can find something quite similar to your own context within your own school. And something else I just wanted to mention as well is in the within the final box, this links to the CPD materials on the website. So within each principal, we have got a link which then links back to the website, which has got a PowerPoint in there, which can be used for staff training with information about that principal itself. It's also got a video on there as well. And all this is free to access. So this is CPD materials that can be used. You can go through them within your own time. Like I said, they should be shared with other staff, but it's just got a bit of an introduction and some CPD for each principal. So that might be a really good place to start if you are new to this, if you are wanting to find out more about what's included within the different principles and just get a bit of an overview and a bit more understanding. It's a really good idea to access these resources as well. But like I said, the examples of the responses are new and uploaded today. So we're really hopeful that will make a difference to schools utilising this toolkit. And rather than having a blank form and not knowing where to start, there's those examples there that give you a real idea of what these different levels look like in on the ground, essentially. And like I said, you can copy and paste these in, but you can also add your own evidence as well. You don't have to use copy and paste. You can add in other things that are relevant to each question as well. So that is the main enhancement that's been made recently. I think I'm trying to think if there's anything else I haven't covered. Matt, can you think of anything else that I haven't mentioned that would be good to highlight now?
Yes,
I think
questions? Yes, if you could go back to the last screen you were sharing, which is of the online toolkit itself. And we're looking at question 2.1 there, and you were explaining how the exemplification is now directly on that question underneath in quotes, which I think is a fabulous enhancement. I mean, I'm sure, Reg, having used it, you're looking at that and thinking, gosh, that's going to make life easier. But coming back to the
why
point
wasn't this done when I started?
Well, I think it's a fantastic enhancement, but something that I think Reg and I have both banged on about, which is strategic oversight and SLT buy-in. Would you just go to the whole PDF document, which is either accessible from the yellow box above, or on the left hand side you've got the guidance resources. If you go into the resources section there, for example, and go to the guidance document for Principle 1.
For the exemplification for Principle 1.
Yeah, the exemplification. Yeah. You'll have to scroll down or go directly. Yes, if you go to the evidence examples, that's it. Yeah.
That's fine. Principle 1.
And if you go to the one that says Principle 1 as an example and open that up. I'm probably showing my age here, and I'm not making any suggestions about yours, Reg, either, but I imagine, given the length that you've worked in the military, you might agree with this. To print a document like this out, which is only 4 pages, and then to hand copies to members of your SLT with a highlighter pen, a good old-fashioned rag rating, and ask people to sort of highlight and annotate, and then bring the copies together to discuss, to come up with a combined view, I still think is a very useful way of using the toolkit. I'm not suggesting that looking at each question isn't useful, because absolutely it is, and having that guidance lifted from this document into the online toolkit is a really useful addition. But for some of these questions, and particularly for Principle 1, I think that's a really useful facility as well, to be able to print out and rag rate. Red, amber, green for those that don't work in education.
Yeah, so
probably showing my age now.
So these ones are these documents can be found within that, the way I just showed you them, within the resources folder, and like I said earlier, they're also within every principle that they can be found there as well. So they're in both places. Thank you so much, Matt, for highlighting that as well, because I always like printing things off, writing on them and things like that as well. So it can be, basically there's different ways of doing it, and there's different ways of downloading it and implementing it within the toolkit. So hopefully any way that you like working, hopefully we've managed to capture that, and it can be done digitally, but like Matt's mentioned, that there are PDFs for every single principle that you could print them off as well. if you did want to use that method rather than just doing it digitally. Can I just check before we come to the end? Can I just check if anyone's got any questions at all? Because I know there might be a few people in here that haven't seen the toolkit much before, or any comments at all from what we've discussed today. Reg, thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something to what I spoke about, and it's to say, don't worry if when you do the toolkit you find areas that you're not doing anything at all, because that's exactly what happened to us. But that was the huge benefit, because we were able to focus on those areas and bring them up to speed. So don't expect to be able to do everything, because you won't be able to. Look to find those areas where you're not doing it and then see what you can do about them. So I just wanted to add that. Don't be scared.
Thank you, Reg. Anyone else got any comments or any questions at all? No, right. Thank you so much. So I'm just going to attempt to share my screen again. So what we would be really grateful for those of you that attended today, is if you could possibly give us some feedback. What I've made sure I've done in the evaluation this time is also ask questions about if there's anything in the toolkit that you would like to see enhanced or changed, so we could get some feedback from those of you that are using the toolkit currently, or those of you that might be new to it. If there's any different themes within webinar sessions that we could do, that would be really helpful. And I've also popped in a question there about if you've got any ideas of how we can promote the toolkit as well. It is a free resource. It's free for schools to use. We're trying to promote it as much as possible to gain a maximum engagement. So there's also a question on there about if there's any ideas of where we could have an advert, or have if we could come along to any events or anything like that to kind of help spread the word. Because obviously you are the people that we're trying to engage and trying to get more schools signing up to the toolkit. So if there's any feedback that you could give us about the toolkit itself and about the promotion of the toolkit, it'd be really appreciated if you could just fill in the evaluation. I think there's only 7 questions on there. There's not a lot of questions, but it'd be really helpful for us to get that feedback from yourselves, to hopefully carry on making these enhancements to the toolkit and help spread the word to get as many schools as possible using it. I'd like to say a big thank you to Matt and Reg for coming along today, for sharing your insights and sharing your experiences as well. It's really helpful to hear from those of you that are using it on the ground. And if you have got any questions after today, please feel free to email me or get in touch with any of us at the SCiP Alliance, and we can help answer any questions. If there's any of you here that would really like a one-to-one session because you don't know where to start and you want some help, I'd be more than happy to have a meeting and go through it step by step. I've had an email recently from a lady who said, I'm such a technophobe, I just need some help to go from this from scratch. So I'm more than happy to meet on a one-to-one basis if that's helpful as well. Thank you so much for coming. For those of you that have attended, we've actually finished 8 minutes early, so you can go and hopefully enjoy the sunshine and get back in 8 minutes of your day. And hopefully we'll see you at the next session. As you've attended today, I'll send an email out when the next session goes out, so then you can sign up to the next session if you're interested as well. Thank you so much, and we'll hopefully see you at the next one at the end of May.